The numbers behind the crisis. Macron's emphasis on efficiency might seem arbitrary or merely ideological, but it directly responds to economic realities that receive surprisingly little attention in public discourse. When we strip away the political posturing and protest slogans, the economic indicators reveal a France caught between two impossible choices: maintaining its cherished social model or avoiding a financial reckoning that mathematics suggests is inevitable. France's economy stands at a precipitous edge, with financial indicators flashing warning signals across multiple sectors. The nation's public debt has reached a critical threshold of 112% of GDP, growing by nearly 15 percentage points since the pandemic began. This places France among the most indebted Eurozone nations, significantly above the bloc's 91% average. While countries like Portugal and Spain have begun reducing their debt burdens, France's continues to grow at approximately 2 to 3 percentage points annually. This mounting debt severely constrains France's fiscal sovereignty. Interest payments consume 8.4% of the national budget, exceeding combined spending on justice, higher education, and environmental protection. Each percentage point increase in interest rates adds roughly 2.5 billion euros to annual debt servicing costs, creating dangerous vulnerability to monetary decisions made in Frankfurt rather than Paris. Simultaneously, productivity growth has stagnated at 0.7% annually over the past decade, less than half the rate of the early 2000s. This slowdown coincides with France's industrial erosion, with manufacturing now comprising just 9.8% of GDP compared to 16% in 2000, and well below Germany's robust 18.5%. The result: persistent trade deficits, including a record 164 billion euro trade gap in 2022, equivalent to 6.4% of GDP. As Marcel Fratzscher, president of the German Institute for Economic Research, warns, France's economic model is approaching its breaking point, caught between unsustainable public finances and a social contract that demands increasing resources. This assessment is reinforced by the innovation landscape, where R&D investment has flatlined at 2.2% of GDP since 2015, while Germany and Nordic nations continue increasing their innovation investments. Patent applications from French entities to the European Patent Office have declined by 12% since 2016, while German applications increased by 8%. France increasingly resembles two separate economies operating in parallel. The Paris region generates 31% of national GDP with just 18% of the population, boasting per capita GDP exceeding 59,000 euros, more than double that of regions like Hauts-de-France. While Paris approaches the national unemployment average, former industrial centers in the Northeast face rates exceeding 12%, with youth unemployment in some communities surpassing 40%. These economic divides manifest in stark human terms. Life expectancy in wealthy Parisian arrondissements exceeds 85 years, while industrial communes in northern France barely reach 77. Educational outcomes reveal similar patterns. Baccalaureate attainment ranges from over 94% in wealthy western Paris suburbs to below 70% in certain northern departments. Social mobility has deteriorated, with children born in the bottom income quintile now having a 42% probability of remaining there as adults, compared to 35% 2 decades ago. The French social model requires a 46.2% of GDP tax burden, the highest in the OECD and nearly 10 percentage points above the organization's average. Yet this heavy taxation hasn't prevented service deterioration, with hospitals facing a 30,000 plus medical professional shortage and 20% of public schools struggling to fill teaching positions. This contradiction between high taxation and declining service quality has eroded public confidence in state capacity. Without fundamental reform of both taxation and public spending, argues French economist Thomas Piketty, France faces a fiscal crisis within this decade that will force painful adjustments under emergency conditions rather than through democratic deliberation. Recent economic pressures have fallen disproportionately on vulnerable populations. Food prices increased 14.8% year-over-year in 2022, while energy costs have risen 28% since 2021 despite government price shields that added 40 billion euros to public debt. For households in the bottom income quintile, these essential expenditures represent over 60% of their budget. The housing market reveals another dimension of economic strain. Property prices have increased 157% since 2000, while average incomes grew just 52%, creating an affordability crisis that has locked younger generations out of property ownership in major cities. In Paris, property now costs 10,590 euros per square meter, requiring 22 years of median salary to purchase a modest apartment, compared to 12 years in 2000. Internationally, France's position continues weakening. The country's share of global exports has halved from 5.8% in 2000 to 2.9% today. As the European Commission noted in its latest assessment, France's structural reforms remain incomplete and insufficient to address fundamental competitiveness challenges. This loss of international standing reflects both rising labor costs relative to productivity and failure to specialize in high-growth sectors. Labor market rigidity further constrains economic adaptation. The World Economic Forum ranks France 130th out of 140 countries for hiring and firing practices, contributing to a situation where 85.7% of new jobs are temporary contracts. This creates a divided labor market between protected insiders and precarious outsiders, predominantly young workers. The European Commission has placed France under its excessive deficit procedure 4 times since 2000, more than any other major EU economy. The IMF similarly warns that without comprehensive reforms, France risks a prolonged period of low growth, high unemployment, and increasing fiscal vulnerability. These converging pressures form the economic reality behind France's current political turbulence. A nation trying to balance cherished social protections against increasingly unforgiving financial mathematics. The collapse of traditional politics, party system failure. These warnings from global institutions highlight a critical question. Who exactly is supposed to implement these comprehensive reforms? France's traditional political parties, the very organizations responsible for governance, have experienced a stunning collapse in legitimacy and power. In just 1 decade, political formations that dominated French politics for generations have virtually disappeared from the landscape. The collapse is stark and measurable. In 2012, the Socialist Party and less Republicans together captured 56% of the first-round presidential vote. By 2022, these same parties managed just 6.5% combined, with socialist candidate and Hidalgo securing a mere 1.7%, the lowest result in her party's history. Political scientist Pascal Perrineau calls this the complete disintegration of France's post-war political architecture. The Socialist Party's fall has been particularly dramatic. After François Hollande's presidency ended with approval ratings below 20%, the party lost 250 of its 280 parliamentary seats. Its historic headquarters on Rue de Solferino had to be sold to cover debts. Party membership plummeted from 220,000 to fewer than 40,000. Less Republicans suffered similarly. Their 2022 candidate Valérie Pécresse captured just 4.8%, falling below the threshold for campaign expense reimbursement and forcing her to make personal appeals to cover 5 million euros in debts. The party of Chirac and Sarkozy now holds just 61 seats in the 577-member National Assembly. Emmanuel Macron stepped into this vacuum with his neither left nor right movement, initially succeeding as an alternative to the failing establishment. His 2017 victory with 66% seemed promising. 5 years later, his percentage fell to 58.5%, and by 2023, his approval rating dropped to 26%, with 70% of French citizens dissatisfied with his leadership. Macron promised to transcend the old divisions, but instead his governance style has alienated both traditional left and right voters without creating a stable new center, explains political scientist Chloe Morin. His own party lacks deep local roots, functioning more as a presidential vehicle than a true political movement. The leadership vacuum has fueled political extremes. Marine Le Pen's national rally reached presidential runoffs in both 2017 and 2022, while Jean-Luc Mélenchon's left-wing La France Insoumise nearly qualified for the 2022 runoff with 22% of votes. The 2022 legislative elections produced a divided National Assembly split between Macron's coalition, 245 seats, the left-wing NUPES alliance, 131 seats, and Le Pen's national rally, 89 seats. Political commentator Natasha Polony describes this as a parliament reflecting France's division into three irreconcilable political families. This fragmentation has paralyzed traditional coalition building. Prime Minister Borne's government has resorted to Article 49.3 to bypass parliamentary votes. Multiple attempts at stable governing coalitions have failed. Meanwhile, electoral abstention reached record levels, 52.5% in the 2022 legislative elections, with over 65% of under 35 voters staying home. Young citizens feel fundamentally unrepresented by parties offering various flavors of the same establishment thinking, notes political scientist Vincent Tybridge. They've migrated to direct action through protests and community organizing rather than electoral politics. Party leaders themselves acknowledge internal failures. Jean-François Cope, former UMP leader, admits, "We failed to renew our ideas and our personnel. We recycled the same faces, the same programs, while society was transforming around us. Our party structures became machines for distributing positions rather than laboratories for new thinking." Former Socialist Minister Aurélie Filippetti echoes this. The Socialist Party became disconnected from working-class communities and social movements. We spoke a technocratic language incomprehensible to ordinary citizens and failed to address their everyday concerns about economic insecurity and identity. The representation gap is severe. Only 12% of French citizens feel their interests are adequately represented by current political parties, dropping to 7% among working-class respondents, according to a 2023 Sciences /Ipsos survey. This collapse stems partly from structural transformations. Traditional left-right divisions emerged from industrial society, but today's fragmented, service-based economy doesn't fit these categories. When a warehouse worker, a delivery driver, and a freelance graphic designer all experience precarity, but in fundamentally different ways, traditional class-based political organizations struggle to represent them collectively, explains political sociologist Bruno Cotters. Organizational challenges compound the crisis. Party membership across all formations has declined by 61% since 2007. Local offices have closed throughout rural France, with active Socialist Party sections falling from over 3,500 to fewer than 1,000. Les Républicains lost 40% of their local offices since 2017. Digital transformation further undermined traditional parties. Social media allows direct candidate voter communication without party infrastructure, while crowdfunding reduces dependence on party financing. Macron's 2017 campaign built a movement from scratch in months, bypassing decades-old party machines. Parties historically served crucial democratic functions beyond elections, training political personnel, developing policy expertise, aggregating diverse interests, and maintaining connections between citizens and the state, observes former parliamentary system expert Michel Wiviorca. These functions are now unfulfilled, weakening the entire democratic ecosystem. The governance implications are profound. With parties unable to build stable coalitions or mobilize public support for reforms, the state increasingly resorts to executive authority and bureaucratic implementation. This technocratic governance further alienates citizens, creating a vicious cycle of declining legitimacy. The Sixth Republic scenario, constitutional revolution. When political systems reach this level of dysfunction, history shows that constitutional structures themselves become vulnerable. France, unlike most democracies, has experience with entirely replacing its system of government, having gone through 5 distinct republics since 1792. And now growing numbers of citizens are openly calling for a sixth. Could these protests actually lead to a sixth republic? The historical pattern suggests that republican transitions in France occur when multiple forces converge. Popular mobilization, elite fragmentation, institutional gridlock, and external pressures. The current situation exhibits several of these characteristics, but lacks the catalyzing crisis that has typically precipitated republican transitions. The concept of a sixth republic represents a fundamental reimagining of French governance. Protesters are questioning whether the Fifth Republic's presidential system, established by Charles de Gaulle in 1958, has become fundamentally incompatible with contemporary democratic demands. The current constitution was designed during a period of crisis, giving extraordinary powers to the executive to ensure stability. However, many French citizens now view these same powers as enabling democratic overreach rather than protecting the republic. France's constitutional history demonstrates a remarkable willingness to start fresh when systems fail. The First Republic emerged from a monarchy in 1792. The second followed the 1848 Revolution. The third arose after the Franco-Prussian War. The fourth came after World War II. And the fifth was established during the Algerian crisis. Each republic was born from the collapse of its predecessor, making France unique among Western democracies in its approach to constitutional reinvention. What might a sixth republic look like? Imagine citizens directly voting on major legislation through digital platforms, presidents with significantly reduced powers, and a parliament that precisely mirrors the electorate's political diversity. Today's movement coalesces around transforming France from a semi-presidential system to a parliamentary democracy. Advocates call for abolishing Article 49.3, eliminating the president's unilateral dissolution powers, and implementing proportional representation. Jean-Luc Mélenchon's La France Insoumise party proposes a constituent assembly specifically elected to draft a new constitution, with mechanisms for citizen-initiated referendums, recall elections, and strict term limits. The Greens and Socialists envision constitutional reforms centered on ecological principles and decentralization of power to regional governments. Even moderate figures recognize the need for change. Former Prime Minister Dominique de Villepin stated, "The Fifth Republic has reached its limits. It was designed for a different France, more centralized, less European, less globalized." This reflects growing acknowledgement that constitutional structures designed for the 1950s may be ill-suited for contemporary governance challenges.